Today we're going to be looking at grandmasters at their best. We're going to be looking at 5 of the best sequences ever played. Not the 5 best, right? You can't do that to beautiful sequences. They're all beautiful in their own way. A beautiful sequence, a brilliant sequence, is like music to the ears for chess players, and that is the intention of this video. Thank you for the comment yesterday. I'm not just going to be showing the moves. We're going to be breaking down the position on an atomic level, so that we can understand the intricacies, how it could have gone, and then how it did go. So this is position number 1. We got Jose Sanz Aguado versus Martin Ordueta Esteban. And in this position, why is black better? Well, black is better because he's up 2 pawns, right? Count it, 1, 2. We have a rook and a bishop versus a rook and a knight. But why is he not winning? Well, he's not winning because look at his structure. Is this a sound structure? Would that survive a hurricane? No. Flimsy. Bad. We got double isolated pawns, double isolated pawn, another isolated pawn. Meanwhile, white structure is, pretty because it hasn't moved, right? It's like the more you do, the less pretty you are. You don't do anything, you're chilling. That's kind of the argument of this pawn structure. That didn't make too much sense. Don't dig too deep into what I just said. But we're going to get into it. Why is this still drawing for white? He didn't find the idea, but the only move, knight to d6. A sensible move. You're aiming at a pawn, a doubled pawn that is, and if you park your knight on c4, that is a light squared blockade. We have a dark squared bishop. Nothing could kick the knight out. You're chilling. I think the reason he was deterred from playing this is due to the move pawn to c3. The point of pawn to c3 is white has to take and it splits his structure. Not so great. Also, we have to deal with the move pawn to c4. That is a check. The king has to move. It doesn't want to get back ranked, so closer to the center because it is an endgame. King activity, pretty important. And we get rook to f8. White's rook is more active. Blocking the check would be good. And since it's more active, black should take. Now, the reason black can't just scoop this up is because then he's going to lose a pawn with check, lose another pawn. So he doesn't want that. He goes here. Now, the best move is actually not knight to g5, picking up this pawn, because the relative value of the c pawn is far greater than that of this e pawn. So what do? You go knight e5, winning the pawn on the light square. They win the pawn on the dark square, you win the pawn on the light square, but they got no passers, and you're chilling. Now, you are down a pawn, but they are bad pawns, and arguably, you'll go knight to e3 and win the pawn right back. Arguably, you will do just that. And that's a draw. Now let's get into what happened. So after the move c4 takes, white played knight c3. Also sensible, but losing. See, these are still doubled pawns. You're blockading it on a dark square. But white's argument is this bishop is tied down to a7 because black can never move the rook if he loses that a pawn. His rook's going to get tied down. His bishop is tied down at the moment. So he has some counterplay. But black's rook is not tied down to a7 right now because of the bishop. So he goes rook to d8, right? Rooks like open files. What else do rooks like? The second rank. I've been told that. It holds true a lot of the time. So in this position, we get knight to a4, right? Just guarding the pawn, attacking the bishop. If the bishop moves, you lose on a7. And find the brilliancy here. I don't know how you see this. This guy was a tank. Rook takes b2. This is a move you play and you just flex. You're just like, what are you going to do? Is that just me? This is beautiful. So you win a pawn. At the very least, you win a pawn. But this rook has to be taken. Otherwise, you're just going to make a few queens win the game. So white does just that. He takes the rook. And now pawn c3, right? What are the worst pieces at stopping past pawns? Newsflash, they are knights because they are poorly coordinated. The reason this works is if knight d3, yes, he's stopping the promotion square. But after c4, what do? You're in check. You're going to lose the knight. Right, either the king has to move, you take. 2 pawns on the third are a queen. Newsflash. We get king to e1. I would just go pawn c2. Rook can't come to c7. King comes to d2. How do you win? This is a little puzzle. Bishop to e3 check. Deflecting the king, making a queen. Simple. Beautiful. But it's still tricky if white plays at his best. Right? And he does. He goes rook takes b6. Rook takes bishop. Now, what do you have to do here? Amazingly not take the rook, because now there's no discovered check. This knight will stop all of the pawns. The king will come in, and actually it is white who is winning. This is what makes this sequence so beautiful. You have to go pawn to c4, that is. Pawn to c4, reason being, you're using the pawns as a shield, right? So after rook c6, you would take the knight on b2. You're making a queen because they can't stop both pawns. What else? Well, what happened in the game? We got rook to b4. Again, if knight takes c4, you just push the pawn. No one is stopping that queen. They can't go rook here because you take and make a queen. The knight blocks the vision of the rook, so you make a queen in that way. So we got the best move again, which is rook to b4. A tricky attempt, but not enough. We get pawn to a5. Beautiful. This should be a brilliancy in and of itself. The point, deflection. You deflect the rook. They cannot stop the pawn from promoting. So what does white do? He takes the pawn. Now again, you do not take the rook. That would be tragic. That would be losing because the pawns are not coordinated. You go pawn c2 and white resigns because no one is stopping the c pawn from making a queen. So that's just puzzle number 1. And we got 5. Count it 6 because I'm going to show one of my own that I got yesterday. As I said, maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but there's going to be 6. Puzzle number 2, position number 2 rather. We got Alexei Shirov, a tank, tactical tank, versus Topalov, very famous grandmaster. This is an opposite color bishop endgame. So you might be like, oh, it's just a draw. Not so fast. What you do not want to do here as black is just start pushing pawns, right? The second you start pushing pawns, it's going to be hard to do anything because you cannot make a queen. Your king is tied down to this f pawn, and since your king is tied down, you can never push this pawn. So say we would get something like bishop a1, right? Kind of like what Ding played in the World Championship match, except it didn't really work out too well. You'd reach a position like this where, again, the pawn is tied down, or the king is tied down to the pawn, and if you go pawn to f5, there's just no barrier for entry on the dark squares. So that's just a little digestion of what is going on. And not many people look for the move that he played. The move that he played is bishop h3. Many of you have probably seen this because it's so famous, but it's just that amazing. And this is going to be a long series, so we'll get to a bunch of positions. Bishop h3, what is the point? Well, the point is that if you don't take that, let's say you just leave it there, black will leave it there himself, and he's just going to get in. He's just going to activate his king and queen the pawns. Right, and if the king leaves, that's just one too many pawns to lose. Easy conversion for black. Up 3 whole pawns. So what does Topalov do? Well, he takes the bishop. Now we get king to f5, marching his king in. Right, he's too fast towards the center of the board. He sacrifices a pawn. And white has to take it because if he doesn't, you push this pawn. Say like king e2, pawn d4. You just got too many pawns. And they're all split so far that the bishop and king cannot stop them both. So white elects to take the pawn. You still get pawn to d4, caging in the bishop. And keep in mind, this is the queening box, and white cannot step into it. So say we get something like king to e2, the bishop cannot stop the pawn from promoting. You might be like, silly guy, I know that. He can go bishop e7 though, stopping the pawn. Only temporarily, that is. The only winning move, not d3 with the pawn, d3 with the king getting in front of it. We get bishop to c5, king c4, gaining a tempo on the bishop, and now everybody's just getting through. Everybody is welcome. We get king to b3, and I believe they play a couple more moves. We get king e2, and here do not go pawn a3. Pawn a3 would be horrible. That would be so sad because now white's king is going to take this guy, take that guy, and make a couple queens himself. He might even ladder mate you. So, what happens? What happens after king to e2? Well, the winning move is king to c2, and white resigns. Point is, no one is stopping this guy from going through. You might be like, that's false. The bishop is stopping it. But he's not. He's actually totally just not. Pawn to a3, a deflection tactic. The pawn gets through, and it's a queen. Amazing. I don't have anything else to say about that one other than Alexei Shirov, you are good at chess. Now, position number 3. This one's going to be a little different, right? You see the bar is equal, but there's going to be a checkmate in 7, one of the most beautiful checkmate in 7s I've ever seen. But black went wrong here. What should black do? Black should take this knight on e5. Now, it's so crazy because you see the bar is equal, but what do you think white would have played in this position? I would argue he would take the bishop on e5, but that's actually incorrect. The only move for equality is knight to d2. Do you guys think he would have found this? Maybe. I mean, it is Edward Lasker, not Emmanuel Lasker. Oh, it's Edward Lasker. Oh, he's probably pretty good as well. Threatening checkmate, right? If the bishop moves, you get this guy. You take it with the bishop, not the queen, because then the king cannot go to f7, has to go to h8. You get boom, bam, checkmate, check and mate. So after knight to d2, black would have to play something of the sort of g6, and then you would take the bishop with the queen, and it's equal. But see, had he taken the bishop with the pawn, there's actually this rook f5 move, and now if anybody's playing to win, it is black. Cuts off the connection on h7. There's a lot of vision being obscured, and it's a complex position. However, black played the move queen e7. Now start calculating the mate in 7. It is forced, so you can find it. First move, queen takes h7, a brilliancy. The king is forced to take, and now another move, knight takes f6. I would say brilliancy, but just double check in reality. Right, if king h8, how do you win? You go knight g6. Not that that's a fork, though it is. That's a checkmate. Two knights next to each other cover a lot of wacky squares. So the king has to go on a run. He's like, I need some cardio. I ate one too many donuts. It's time to run. Now we got knight e to g4 because it's very important that this knight guards h5. What is the king's only square? I'd say it's g5, legally speaking. We got pawn h4 now. Again, only moves for the king. King to f4, pawn to g3. You might be like, I'm losing a rook. No, that's not how chess works. You're in check. Again, black's king only has one move, king to f3. In this position, we get bishop to e2. Look at that. All the squares are just covered. This knight's just chilling on f6. We get king to g2. How would you finish it off? Rook to h2 sounds good to me. We get king g1. And rather than castling, he goes king to d2 and just puts the game away. Black played till checkmate. I'm happy because it is nice to see checkmate on the board. Right? You deserve it if you find these types of ideas. Position number 4. This one's the only one that is actually a composition, not a game. But until you put it into the engine does not see it. And it takes time. Didn't take time for this guy to make the composition. White is winning. Let's just coordinate ourselves. Black is going down. White is going up. All right, we got that clear. What is the first move? I think many of you guys will find the first move. The move is bishop to a7. The point is, it's a deflection. Right? If we get bishop takes bishop, the pawn just runs through. And that is a queen. Now, what to do? Black's like, okay, I'm going to go bishop a1. White's like, okay, I'm going to go king b1. You got to move your bishop. Fair statement. The bishop has to go to c3. If it goes to d4, you are in the queening box. See? Beautiful queening box. That's a bad box. And black is not. I mean, you don't even really need to draw it, but we can, and we will. So, black goes bishop to c3. Best moves only. King c2. Again, d4 off limits. So we get a1. Now, find the winning move here. The only winning move is bishop to d4. It's so nice seeing moves like this. The point is, if pawn takes, we get king d3. That bishop is useless. That pawn is a g and will become a queen. And then you just win on the light squares because they're trapped on the dark squares. That's how you win queen versus bishop and pawn. Play on the light squares. Opposite color of the bishop. So black has to take on d4 with the bishop, and he does just that. And king to d3. Right? The point is, if discovered check, you might be like, yes, my bishop is guarding the queening square. But then the bishop is gone and you lose. So after this, black moves the bishop. How do you make black resign here? You go king e4, GG's. The pawn cannot move. This pawn will move and it will become a queen. Don't make it a rook. That'll be a draw. So that's position number 4. Now back to real people. Well, not real people, because how do real people see these types of moves? We got Frank James Marshall playing with the black pieces versus Stefan Levitsky. In this position, it is white to move. White decides to go tricky and play rook takes d5. Point is, this pawn is pinned, right? So if you take this rook, boom, you'll get checkmated in 3 moves. Did you see it? Check, here, boom, bam, mate. Checkmate in 3. Never too late to lose a chess game. However, this guy Marshall was like, I'm just going to go knight to d4. You're like, what is going on? This might be one of the most famous ones of all time. I will pick out ones you guys haven't seen. I hope you haven't seen all of these, but we got to start somewhere, right? So knight e4, knight d4 that is, I know my coordinates, aiming at the queen, threatening the queen in 1 move. The queen moves to h5. You might be like, I don't get it. I'm just going to take this rook. No, you're not, because then he's going to take our rook, and then it's just tricky. So don't do that. So after the move queen to h5, we get the move rook e to f8, just calmly saving the rook. And then black goes rook e5. He had to sacrifice his rook for the knight, but he was like, okay, I have a lot of defense on my king. Wrong he was. Rook to h6, not anything crazy, but forcing the queen to move. The queen does just that. And what do you do here? The first move, rook takes h3. Should be a brilliancy, but it's not, because after pawn takes, you just get the royal fork. You're winning the whole house. You're winning the whole game. So he's like, okay, I'm not going to take that. I'm going to threaten your queen, right? Your queen has to move. If it moves away, maybe I can play a little bit. And then we get queen to g3. This is insane. I believe white resigned here, but let's talk about why. I'm sorry if that was anticlimactic. But the point is, if h takes g3, do you see the checkmate? This hanging rook is just hanging out, cutting off the h file, checkmate in 1, knight e2. Okay? What happens if f takes? You don't take the rook, you're at a material deficit. You go knight to e2. Again, king can't come to f2 because of our rook on the f file. King comes to h1. You checkmate them. Never too late to get checkmated in chess. We all know that. Last one, what if queen takes g3? Well, if queen takes g3, there's no mate, unfortunately, but you're just winning the whole game. And in a disrespectful manner, might I add, right? You fork them, you win the queen. Again, they cannot take because of mate. They cannot take because of pin. They move the king. And here you can either, annoy them a little bit with knight e2 if you want, right? If you want to be extra rude, just give them a couple checks. Don't give 3 because it's a 3-fold repetition. But then you could just cash out. Right, I don't think they would take your knight. I think they would take your pawn. But look at their structure. Everything is isolated. Some are doubled. We got a knight. We got a good pawn structure. We're chilling. We're winning. So those are 5 of the most beautiful sequences ever. We're going to continue this with game number 6. This was my game. I was happy with this because I had 36 seconds on the clock versus an IM. And how do you win this as black with 36 seconds? Well, you start off by, okay, your pawn is hanging. It's equal material, mind you. But I really liked my pieces. My knight, bishop are guarding this. I was happy I took with the pawn because it made this knight bad, as you could see. We're aiming at e3. That's why he went rook e1 to defend. That's what we need to digest. And then you find the move rook to f3. Took me like 8 seconds, but we spotted it. The point is, well, you are pressurizing e3, which is why essentially it has to be taken. Okay, computer doesn't take it, but for the purpose of the argument, let's say it has to get taken. Which pawn do you take with? Obviously the g pawn, because you open up a route of attack over here towards his king. Keep in mind, this rook on the 5th will come in handy later. So it's a good rook. Now, what to do? Well, ironically, white's best move in this position is knight to e2, and then you don't take that. You just come in and checkmate them. So that's pretty cool. So we get queen to c2. He's like, I got a queen on the 2nd. I need some defense. You sacrifice the bishop. Boom. I guess that's a brilliancy. And if the king moves anywhere, you just take the rook and you're going to win that way. So he takes the bishop. I take with the queen. Regardless of what his next move is, can you find the winning move here? The winning move, knight takes e3. Apparently not a brilliancy, but it's almost checkmate. Their only legal move is taking the rook. And how do you win? What was the point? It was a clearance sacrifice to clear the 5th rank. So now I could play the move rook to h5. He didn't let me play it out. But the point is, you cannot stop rook h1 checkmate. This pawn is a tank. This queen's a tank. All the pieces are tanks. So that was position number 6. I will be doing this weekly. I think we got a lot of new series on our hands. We got the best moves, the worst moves, subscriber games. We're getting a montage. We like game reviews. I'm going to organize it, make a schedule, pick out days of the week. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, thank you for watching, and I think I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace. Boom.